Welcome to Equip, Build, and Mature. It's a scorcher today. And on this Saturday, I will be doing an overview of one of the books of the Bible. And today the book is Job. We ask questions, and so the first question will be, who wrote the document? Now, it is really not known who wrote the book of Job. There are several possibilities. First, Job is the first obvious choice. Second, Elihu, the fourth friend of Job, who spoke near the end of the narrative. The third option is different biblical writers and leaders. Or the fourth option is many editors who gathered the material over the years. But there is no definite answer of who wrote the book of Job. Now, an eyewitness could have recorded the long and detailed conversations that we find in the book. Now, in the periods of time when the Old Testament was written, writers often referred to themselves in the third person. So Job, the man, is a strong possibility as the author of the book of Job. Now, Job was a wealthy landowner, a husband, and a father. He is one of the most well-known biblical characters. But we really only know the basic facts about the man Job. We know that he lost everything without warning. And we know that that was a severe test of his proclaimed faith in God. So what time in history is this taking place? Well, the setting is not directly identified. Now, internal evidence in the book indicates that Job lived during the time of the patriarchs, around 2100 to 1900 BC. Now, according to Job chapter 42, verse 16, Job lived 140 years after his tragedies took place, so almost 210 years. So his generally long life was similar to Abraham's dad, Terah, Abraham himself, Isaac, and Jacob. And like Abraham, as we read in Genesis chapter 12, verse 16, Job's wealth was measured in livestock. We see that in Job chapter 1, verse 3, and in Job chapter 42, verse 12. And like the patriarchs, Job used God's title El Shaddai, not Yahweh. And El Shaddai means God Almighty. Now, the book does not mention the law of Moses, and some of the facts of Job's life would not have been possible under the law of Moses. We can read that, the law in Leviticus chapter 14, verse 10, and in Numbers chapter 27, verse 8. So the first challenge that we would know it wasn't written under the law of Moses is that Job's daughters were equal heirs with his sons. That did not happen under the law of Moses. Secondly, Job was not a priest, but he offered sacrifices. So it's not certain, but Job may have lived during or around the time of Jacob. Now, Job lived in the land of Uz, U-Z, however you say it, Uz. We read that in Job chapter 1, verse 1. So no one really knows the exact location of Uz. Scholars think it was just outside of Canaan, near the desert, because the customs, the vocabulary, and references to geography and natural history, they relate more to the northern part of Arabia. So why is the book of Job so important? Well, the Israelites classified Job as part of their wisdom literature. The book has language from ancient legal actions and laments, songs of grief. And it uses unique terms not found anywhere else in the Bible. And most of Job is written as Hebrew poetry. Now, the book closely examines the emotional issues of many humans who experience some type of suffering. Now, the introduction offers us great insight into the story behind the story. Why God allowed Satan to afflict Job with such pain and such disaster. In a series of exchanges and long speeches, arranged in patterns of three, human wisdom tries to explain the unexplainable. And finally, we see that God spoke from his perspective. Now, Job's final chapters give God's expert defense of his majesty and his unique eternal transcendence above creation. And this aspect, or this part of Job that speaks from God's perspective, it contrasts with Job's humble and ignorant mortality. Job chapter 38, verse 4, Job is asked by God, "Where were you when I established the earth? Tell me if you have understanding." So what is the big idea? What is the main point of the book of Job? Well, many people approach Job's suffering, I believe, with the wrong premise, that Job or humans do not deserve to suffer like this. I believe that is a wrong premise. And the wrong question is usually, why do bad things happen to good people? I don't believe that's the question God intends for us to ask. The question God intends for us to ask with Job is, how should God's covenant people endure suffering? See, God allows pain for good reason. We may not understand the reason, but if we trust God and have faith in God, then we trust there is something that we can learn from the pain or suffering or trials we go through. Yet, God may never reveal his reasons for the difficulty or the challenge that we have to go through. Now, Job, despite all these challenges and difficulties and losses, Job did not reject God, but he did challenge God and he did accuse God. But the Almighty firmly quieted Job when God finally spoke from his own perspective on that specific situation. Now, God did not answer Job's question of why. God never answered the why. Instead, God overwhelmed Job and his friends with the truth of God's majesty and God's sovereignty. Job gained a deeper sense of God's power and God's majesty. Now, in the end, we see that Job trusted God even more than before. We read this in Job chapter 42, verses 5 and 6. And this is what it says. Job speaking to God. "I had heard reports about you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore, I reject my words and am sorry for them. I am dust and ashes." So how does this document of Job apply to you and me in the 21st century? Well, here's the fact. Pain definitely hits each one of us. Suffering is absolutely unavoidable in this life. But the question is, will your relationship with God be strong enough when trials or sufferings take place in your life? Will your trust hold through the suffering that you must endure? I encourage you, spend time with the Almighty and read Job chapters 38, 39, 40, 41, and 42. And after you read those, or as you're reading those chapters, I encourage you to pray for a stronger faith in the powerful Creator that's described in chapters 38 through 42. Pray to have the proper perspective of God so that you might see every life situation through His eyes and not just through yours or other humans' eyes. And stop asking where God is in the middle of your pain. Learn from Job. Job affirmed that God is in control. So the real question that I believe you and I should be asking is, where am I in my pain? In my pain, do I trust my Creator? Even though I cannot understand my circumstances, do I still trust my Creator? Thank you guys for listening. Hope you have a great day, and I encourage you as always to keep on the path of God's truth. Find His way, His truth in His life, and life will make so much more sense. Hope you have a great Saturday. May God continue to bless you.